Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of NCompass Live. I am your host, Krista Porter, here at the Nebraska Library Commission. NCompass Live is the Commission's weekly webinar series where we cover a variety of topics that may be of interest to libraries. We broadcast the show live every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time. But if you're unable to join us on Wednesdays, that's fine. We do record the show as we are doing today, and it will be available for you to watch later at your convenience. And I will show you at the end of today's show where you can access all of our show recordings. Both the live show and the recordings are free and open to anyone to watch, so please do share with anyone, any of your colleagues, other librarians, anyone who you think might be interested in any of the topics we have on NCompass Live. Here at the Nebraska Library Commission, we provide resources and training and databases and grants to all types of libraries in the state. So we do have trainings, sessions on NCompass Live for all types of libraries, public, academic, K-12, corrections, museums, historical societies, et cetera, et cetera. Really, our only criteria is that it's something to do with libraries. We bring in guest speakers to talk on NCompass Live from all across the country sometimes, but we also have Nebraska Library Commission staff that do presentations for us, and that is what we are doing today. Joining us today is Sam Shaw, who is our Planning and Data Services Coordinator here at the Nebraska Library Commission. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning.
And he is also our public library survey dude, as you all probably know and have worked with him before on this public library survey, an annual thing that we do here. And a bit of a change this year, and that I'm sure everyone has heard about, hopefully, but we wanted to do a specific session to make sure everyone is aware, and just to give you a little bit more info and prompting to do your survey in the new data collection tool we have. So I will hand it over to you, Sam, to tell us all about the survey and how they can all get their information to us.
Thank you, Krista. I'd like to give a little bit of an overview of the Public Library Survey for those that may not be familiar with it first. The Public Library Survey is an annual event where every state collects data from public libraries. It's part of a national data collection program sponsored by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And we'll show the new data collection tool here in a minute, but you'll notice on the survey itself, there are some questions that will appear in purple, and those are the federally required questions. So those are the questions that every state asks, and we all use the same definition for those. And then as a state, we can ask any questions that we believe are important at the state level, and you'll see those on the survey in black. And so sometimes we want a little bit more detail, whereas the federal question may want like a total. We want like more of a breakdown, or we might want to know something that's maybe that they feel is not important at the national level. So the annual collection, the data collection contributes to that IMLS file, the national file, but it also contributes to our state file, which we publish and make those data available at the state level on our website. We're also required to do this by statute. 51407 requires us to collect an annual report from public libraries. And so the Public Library Survey fulfills that requirement. It's also required if your library is accredited. You have to, as a maintenance of your accreditation, you have to submit annual statistics, and the reason for that is that the accreditation process uses peer comparisons, or it compares your data, your library's data with another library of similar size or similar type. And so that's required to maintain that accreditation. If your library is not accredited, you can still submit the survey, of course, and if you do submit it online, you're eligible for a $200 grant from the Library Commission as kind of an incentive to push you towards accreditation. So that's the first step in becoming accredited.
And if you are accredited, you also get additional state aid funding. because of
Correct.
that level that you're at if you're silver or gold.
Yeah, so that's another important reason to submit your statistics. Typically, our data collection cycle runs where we open the survey in mid-November, and we collect data until about mid-February, about right now is when we're typically closing things up. And then we clean up the data in the spring and get it ready to be loaded into the accreditation application, which opens, I believe, July 1. This year we're behind, obviously. And the reason for that is we lost our vendor. So since 2001, we were using a data collection tool called Bibliostat, which was a product that was provided by Baker & Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, Baker & Taylor ceased operations last year. And so there was uncertainty as to what the future of that product would be. And so what we did is we created our homegrown tool, and I want to give a shout out to Vern Bias, our computer guy, who developed our tool that we are using this year. And so because of that, we've extended our deadline, if you notice here on this main page, to April 1st for data collection. And hopefully that'll give us enough time to clean up our data, get it submitted to IMLS, and published on our website, and then loaded in the accreditation application. So if we look at the screen here on the main page, this contains a link to the Public Library Survey login, and we'll get in and show you some things here in a minute. We won't have time to go through everything, but we can kind of highlight, the interface, the new interface, navigation, how to deal with edit checks, explain edit checks, and so kind of some common issues that arise. You'll notice here we also have a link to the blank survey. We often recommend that you print this out and work with it offline, and then like hand fill in your data, and then you can just go onto the online tool and enter your data all at once. That way you're not going back and forth trying to collect the data and then enter it into the online tool. The next link down here, it says federal data element definitions. Those are the definitions for those questions that we're federally required to provide. And so these would be the definitions that would apply to every state. So if you're in another state and you are doing the survey, you would have these questions on your survey, and those are the definitions. In the online tool, we also have definitions built into that, and we'll show you that in a minute, where there's a little question mark next to the question where you can pull up the definition and look at that. It helps to read those first because that will answer a lot of questions about what to count and how to count it. The good news for Overdrive here, you'll notice we have two guides for Overdrive Circulation and Overdrive Advantage. Those numbers are all pre-filled for you on your survey if you're a member of the Overdrive Libraries group. Deborah Dragos gives me those numbers and we pre-fill them for you. That would be things like ebook circulation, e-audio circulation, e-serials, so on and so forth. We don't report holdings anymore for e-materials. But if you did want to know how those numbers were obtained, like say you wanted to look at those maybe monthly, we have a guide here that'll help you run those reports on your own if you want to. And if anybody has any questions as we get into things, feel free to type in the chat and Krista can jump in and we'll try and answer those. So if you click on this Public Library Survey login, if you're a director that completes a survey in Nebraska, you should have received an email from me with a link to your survey login. And let me close this out because I want to show you one other thing here. If you click on the survey login, this is going to take us into the test survey. There was another page on there that I wanted to show you, but for some reason it's got me logged in. When you click on the survey login, there's a little box that pops up that will prompt you to enter your ID and password. that would be the ID and password that I would email to you. There also on that page is a link if you've forgotten your password that will take you to a page on our website where you can enter your city, and it'll automatically generate an email to the library director that we have on file, the email for the library director that we have on file. So that's kind of helpful if you can't get a hold of me, can't get a hold of the NLC front desk. You can just type that in. And the password is the same for your accreditation application and the public library survey and the supplemental survey, which we'll go over in a minute as well.
Here, hang on, Sam. I can. I'm going to quickly. I've got it up on my screen here.
Okay.
What it looks like, and
it looks like yeah, it looks like that. So if you click on that little password ID help screen, there's the link for your misplaced ID or password. You can click on that and then enter your city. Like say you were in Columbus, Nebraska, you could just enter Columbus and it would automatically generate an email to the director. So that's kind of nice if you're working on the survey or your accreditation application on the weekend or at night. You can do that.
Yeah, the accreditation application will send you to the same place to look up your.
Correct. Yeah, it's the same password and ID. I would say that most of the issues that we have with logins are due to the user entering a capital 0 instead, or capital O instead of a 0. All of our passwords and IDs use numbers. It'll be like NE and then a series of numbers, and then the password is PASS and then a series of numbers. Okay.
All right.
So
I'm gonna make you presenter again.
Thanks for doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you log in, when you enter your ID and password, the main screen looks like this. It looks similar but different than Bibliostat, if you're familiar with how we use Bibliostat. And you'll notice here at the survey submission deadline, April 1st, you can click on the question marks for a pop-up with the question definitions. Federally required questions are in purple. And if you have changes to any locked fields, you can email me and we can unlock those for you or make the changes. A lot of the fields are locked because they have data that usually doesn't change from year to year, like the name of the library, the address. There's a lot of codes that we'll show you here in a minute. If for some reason your library name changed, you move to a new location, something like that, contact me because there's some things that we need to do on the back end to get those changed, and then I can make the changes on your survey. But the reason that we lock those is they don't usually typically change from year to year, and we have to have consistency in the codes. If you'll notice over here on the left-hand side, you'll see the navigation. We have part 1 is general data, 2 is facility, 2A outlet data. And when we talk about outlet data, most libraries in Nebraska have just one outlet location, the main library, the central library. But if you're in a larger system that has branch locations or bookmobiles, we would collect the hours and the weeks open for the bookmobile or the branch locations. So like if you were in Lincoln, for instance, you would see an outlet data record for each branch. So each branch you would report the hours and weeks open. But if you just have a central library, you'll just see one record for the central library. Finance part over here in part 3, collections is part 4, services is part 5, technology, staffing, we have a narrative, and then the certification section. And then below the certification section, you'll see 2 links. One is for review survey, and one is for submit survey. When you submit it, it does give you the option, there's a link that you can print the survey. If you are working on it and wanted to print it, you could go into this review button, and I'll just click on that, and it'll show you the current year's data here that you've entered, and then the previous year's data here that you've entered. So if you wanted to print that off while you were still working on it, you could just by clicking on the print icon, and then it would print that way. Or if you wanted to save it to a PDF, you could do that too. So let's go back to the survey, and we'll show you some common things. Part 2, for instance, these are all going to be pre-filled and locked. You see how these are grayed out? That means that they're locked and you can't change them. And you'll see here the question mark. This is what we were talking about with the question definitions. Like say you wanted to know if you're, say you added a vehicle or say a book bike or something like that, and you wanted to know if that would count as a bookmobile. You could click on this little question mark, and if you can see the pop-up, hopefully you can see it. It defines what a bookmobile is and gives you the criteria for it. So if you had a book bike, it wouldn't meet the definition because it has to be a truck or a van that carries an organized collection of library materials. So that wouldn't be counted as a bookmobile. So those question definitions are always helpful if you have questions about what to count or how to count it. Sometimes
these definitions are determined by the IMLS. We don't have any.
Correct. Now, if it's a state question, it is our definition that we provide. So sometimes that can be confusing because their definition is maybe unclear. We try to provide it in the most clear way that we can, but sometimes there are questions that where things are maybe unclear with that definition. So in part 2, the thing that you need to, there are a few yes/no questions here. You'll notice that these are not grayed out. You'll want to enter, if you know, the year of your latest major renovation or addition. Are you working on a building plan? We like to collect those data because there may be libraries that want to start a building plan and they want to be connected with another library that went through a building plan. That way we can put them in touch with each other. And then you'll see codes here, legal basis code, geographic codes. Those are all pre-filled and locked. If you have questions about those codes, you can contact me. But generally those are pre-filled and just leave them the way that they are. They don't change from year to year. And then in 2.14, we have a few yes/no questions here about handicap accessible facilities. Do you offer a meeting room or meeting rooms? And then the number of times the meeting room was used, if you know. And then do you charge a fee for the room? And then we also have a question about outside circulation. And then down at the bottom, you'll see here's the navigation screen for advancing to the next page, saving the page. You can cancel if you maybe entered something and you wanted to cancel what you had entered, or you can go back a screen. And you'll notice here all these links are active because we didn't make any changes to this page. But let's say that we did. Let's say that we added a curbside pickup. If we click on curbside pickup, do you see how that bottom screen changed? And now we only have 2 options. One is cancel or one is save. So we always recommend, even with the old system, that if this is correct, then go ahead and click save. And then you'll see that those forward and back buttons are now active. And if you click on the back button, you'll get a little pop-up that will say, do you really want to lose the data that you've entered on this page and go back? And then it's like a yes/no type thing. But in this case, if we wanted to advance forward, we would just hit the button here. And then here's those outlet records that we talked about. Here's an example for the main library. Again, a bunch of codes here, but the ones that you want to pay attention to are, you want to double check your library building square footage. If you had an addition, this might have changed. Sometimes we've noticed that it's just incorrect. So it's always a good idea to review that and make sure that that's correct. And then in 2.30, that's where you enter your hours open. And in 2.31, you enter your weeks open. And you'll notice here that on every question, we've provided you with the answer from last year. So this is always helpful because say you entered this incorrectly and you entered 178, you would kind of know, oh, that's not correct if you looked at last year's number. A lot of the data in most of the survey parts should vary a little bit from year to year, and there's exceptions to that, but generally not be exactly the same, but vary a little bit from year to year. Now, some things don't change from year to year, but generally speaking, there should be a slight variance from year to year. Hours and weeks open might not change from year to year, so usually this is the same as last year. And then you'll see 2.32, and you'll notice that this is the same as what you entered up here in 2.30, and the reason for that is that in this example test survey, you only have the one central library. This would be different if you were, say, Lincoln, Omaha, or another location that had a branch location or a bookmobile. This total public service hours would be the sum of those branch locations and bookmobiles. And you'll notice here there's a button that says Add Note. We will show you that in a minute. We'll pull up an edit check and explain to you what an edit check is and then how to enter a note to resolve that edit check. If you've used Bibliostat in the past, the system is similar to Bibliostat. We don't have all of the options that they had. I think they had state, federal, local note options. We only have one note option for the federal questions. And then I think there was one in Bibliostat that was for previous year where you could copy and paste for previous year. So since this is the first year in the homegrown system, we're collecting a section of notes, maybe things that are important to you as the end user that we can then make changes for next year. You'll also notice that we do not have a flag option. In Bibliostat, there was an option to flag a question. And then at the end, when you went to submit the survey, you could look at that flagged question. We don't have that in this thing, but we've already been contacted by a few libraries that think that that's important. So that's on the list of potential fixes for next year. So let's save this and move on to part 3. Did you have somebody have a question?
Not yet.
No. Okay.
Questions? If anybody does have anything you want to know more about, anything you're confused about, you want to dig in a little bit more, do type into that question section of your GoToWebinar interface. I'm keeping an eye on that here. Okay, so part 3, the thing to remember in part 3, there's 2 sections in the finance part. There's revenue and expenditures. So for revenue, you report what funds are available to you. In other words, if you got a grant for, or the city gave you $20,000 for your annual budget, regardless of how much of that $20,000 you spent, you would report that here in the city or village revenue section. And it looks like on this test survey that was $100,000 in one. That's unusual. We would expect it to be 100,000 even, but anyway, whatever funds are available to you is what you report here. And then you'll notice that these are not purple questions. They're not federal questions. We want to know the total breakdown of the sources of your revenue. So what did you get from the city or the village? Here, what did you get from the township? And you'll notice this structure throughout the finance part where in 3.4, you enter the name of the township, and then 3.5, you enter the township revenue that you've received. And you'll notice here in the examples, if you received money from multiple townships, in Bibliostat, you had the option to itemize each one of those. In our version of the data collection tool, we've tried to simplify that and just say, we just want to know the total from township sources, and then you just enter the name separated by a comma. And so in this example, if you received money from Arlington Township and Center Township, you would just enter Arlington, comma, Center, and then the total sum of both those sources. And then we also have a breakdown for county revenue, same structure, and then the other section. This is unusual to receive money from another source that's not county, city, or a township, but say you did receive money from a Keno source in this example, you would just enter that the same way. And then you'll notice here that the total, the program will do the math for us, and then the total is the one that's in purple, the one that we report. That's the federal question.
And so let's go on to state government revenue. So most of the state government revenue comes from the Library Commission that public libraries would receive, although it's possible that you could receive money from another agency, like say you got a grant from the Historical Society or some other entity. You would report that here in the state government revenue. If you receive state aid, we talked about accredited libraries, that'll be pre-filled for you. We pull those for you and pre-fill it. We don't pre-fill the other grants just because the timelines are kind of, can be different from your fiscal year, and since it's a reimbursement, they're not all paid out at the same time. And so we don't pre-fill those for you on the survey. Let's say, for instance, last year in the library improvement grant section, you didn't receive one, but this year received one for $10,000. You would enter that $10,000 here. And then let's say the other ones were 0. I'm going to try and show you what an edit check would come up. And you'll notice here that the total state government revenue last year was only $13.17. That was probably state aid. This year, because of that large grant, it's $11,116. If we go to save that, do you see how this popped up over on the right-hand side? That's what we call an edit check. So edit checks the system will look at what you entered last year and compare it to this year, or it'll look at one part of the survey and compare it to another part of the survey. For instance, it will look at ratios between revenue and expenditures. It will look at your collection versus your circulation, that type of thing. And because it's outside of a certain range, it'll come up with this edit check. In this case, we get a text that says, your state government revenue has changed significantly compared to last year because we have this large increase here. And then it says, if this is correct, please add a note confirming that it is correct. And so in our example, this is correct because we got that large grant. So in order to satisfy this edit check and be able to move past this page, we have to enter a note here. And in this case, it's pretty simple. We just put correct. We received a grant this year, a large grant, or however you want to word it. You could enter that like that, and then save that page, and it'll save your note, and you see how the edit check went away? So then that resolves the edit check and allows you to move forward. And that's one of the reasons why we recommend, you can skip around on the survey over on the left navigation bar, but we really recommend that you do the survey in a chronological order, because if you don't, you may be at part 5 in the survey and there may be an edit check that's comparing that to part 4 or part 3. And if you haven't entered the data for part 4, you might get an edit check in part 5 because you haven't entered anything in part 4. So you do have the option to move around on the left-hand side with the navigation, but it really works better when you move in chronological order because those edit checks are on the last question that compares a ratio or compares to last year.
Okay, that was going to be a question I had. Someone was wondering, that edit check there was at the very bottom, but would there have been anything above on this page that would pop up for an edit check?
There could be. It doesn't come up on this page because the edit checks are only on the federal questions, the purple ones.
Okay.
But if you were on a page like in part 5 where there might be multiple federal questions, you may have a bunch of edit checks on that page that you have to enter a note for each question to resolve them. And so we can maybe show you that when we get to part 5, how that might work. But yeah, that's possible that you could have multiple edit checks. And
Okay,
this will be
anything in red, basically, is the
yep. And this will be blocked out. It won't let you move to the next page, and it won't save the page that you're on unless you enter a note. And so what we're recommending right now, we're kind of looking into a flag option because of that, and for libraries that might want to skip around. So we're recommending right now that you can, to resolve the edit check, like say you wanted to come back to it later on, you can just enter something in the note that says, we're, correct, I'm gonna look at this later or something like that, just to resolve the edit check and then go back in later and change the note. So that'll enable you to save that page and move to the next screen, if that makes sense, since we don't have a flag option. Okay, so let's move on to part 4. So you'll see in the revenue section, you'll see that breakdown of state government revenue. You'll see also breakdowns of expenditures, like what you spent on your collection. Actually, I can show you that real quick. I think it's in part, let me go to part 4 here. Oh, I should talk about capital revenue. So you have capital revenue and capital expenditures. These are generally revenue that would be for a one-time major project. There's examples here if you want to read through them. New buildings, new additions. Say the city allocated extra money for a new HVAC system or a new roof or something like that. New windows, anything that's a major one-time project, you would report that in the capital revenue section. And we have breakdowns by local government, state government, federal, and then the other section. And then for the expenditure, you would report the corresponding capital expenditure in the expenditure section. Let's say the money didn't come from the city, but you got an insurance payout because you had a flood or a damage to the roof. You would report that in the other section. And you have the option to enter a note if you want to enter a note that says, it was an insurance settlement or something like that. Otherwise, put it in the appropriate category and then report the expenditure in the capital expenditure. So for expenditures, you report what you actually spent. And let me hop over there. So here we have the breakdown. We want to know what you spent on salaries and wages, employee benefits. Benefits does include Social Security and FICA withholdings. So it'd be unusual for this to be a 0. Unless you were paid like as an independent contractor, then you might have a 0, and you probably would get an edit check for something like that. And just enter a note explaining why there was nothing withheld. Or if you were all volunteer library, this might be a 0, and you would just enter a note because you're going to get an edit check that says we don't have paid staff. And then we have a section for benefits for the library director. These are just yes, no buttons that you can switch here. And let's go to the next section because I want to talk a little bit about collection expenditures. So in 3.50, you report what you spent, what you actually spent. So generally speaking, these would typically be not nice round numbers, and they wouldn't match exactly what your revenue was. In fact, it'd be unusual for your total expenditures to match your total revenue. You report what you actually spent on library materials in print format. If we click on the question, it gives you an example that you would include books, serial back files, serial subscriptions, government documents, and anything else that you acquire in print. And then library materials in electronic format. This is where you would report if you had any expenditures for overdrive. If you're in the Nebraska Overdrive Consortium, typically for a lot of libraries, this is $500 every year. And then the other section, this would be audio and video physical units, CDs, DVDs, or anything else in physical format, like cake pans would be a common one, tools, anything else in physical format that you had in the collection. You would report that in 3.52. And then we have the total down here. Okay, so let's go on to collections, if anybody has any questions about revenue, and if you have specific questions, you can always contact me and I can help you with that. I can log into your survey I review all the surveys after they're submitted, but I can log in if you're still working on it and see if there's anything that, if you have a question, or say you have an edit check that you're not sure how to resolve, I can help you with that. In library collections, you'll see kind of a common structure and a breakdown here. Like for books, you'll start with the number that you ended with last year. So if you'll look here, the books that we had held at the end of last year was 26,379. That is the number that will pre-fill in your starting number for this year. You would just add the number that you, enter the number that you added, enter the number that you weeded, and then you would have the current total that you would hold at the end of the year. And we say end of the year, we mean the end of the fiscal year. If you noticed in part 3, the first 2 questions were your fiscal year. Typically, for most libraries, that aligns with the federal fiscal year, which is October 1 through September 30th, or the state fiscal year, which is July 1 through June 30th, or we have a few libraries with a calendar year fiscal year. So whatever your fiscal year is pre-filled on there, that's what you would report here. So the number of books you added, number weeded during that fiscal year. And you'll see this repeat again for audio physical units, video, print serial subscriptions, and then we have the other category. And here in this example, this would include cake pans, puzzles, puppets, games. This would be anything that you circulate that actually leaves the library. If it's something that's just provided in-house, you wouldn't report it here. We'd have another section for reporting those types of things, but not in the other materials section. You'll notice here that's a purple question. Okay, so let's go over and spend a little time on part 5, because that's where we get the majority of the questions in part 5. Part 4 is generally pretty straightforward. It's added, weeded, and then the totals. If we go to part 5, number of registered borrowers. If you'll click on the question mark, it gives you an example of the definition. This is a library user who has applied for and received an identification card from the library, who can borrow materials or gain access to library resources. They recommend that you purge your files every 3 years. Of course, you can do it every year or sooner if you'd like, but should be verified or purged every 3 years.
Sam, we do have a question about the financials that just popped up. If I have a grant funding that was not fully expended, how do I report that?
Yeah, so
just what, well, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that would be like a common thing. Like say your fiscal year ended June 30th, and you got a grant for $10,000 from the commission on June 29th. You would report that $10,000 on this year's survey, and then you would report the expenditure on next year's survey. And you may get an edit check for that question. And if you did, you would just enter a note saying, we received the funds this fiscal year and we are not going to expend those until next year. This does happen from time to time, but that's how you would report it. So technically, since the funds were received in this fiscal year that covers this report, you would report the revenue there. And then the expenditures, if they occurred next year, you would report those. Keeping in mind that you might get that edit check next year as well, saying, wait a minute, where'd this money come from? And you would just report grant was received in the prior year, or PY. For
add a note explaining it.
Yeah. Right, that's how you would report that. That's fairly common.
Awesome, thank you, Lacey.
So, and then here we have library visits, and you'll notice here, do you see this question after library visits? You'll see this in part 5 quite a bit. Regarding the total number of library visits, is this an actual count or an estimate based upon a typical week or weeks? And then you would just select, estimate or count. It's perfectly fine to provide estimates for these questions for visits, reference transactions, uses of public computers, so on and so forth. You'll see this throughout. We do recommend, if you're going to do an estimate, do it on an average week or an average month, or take a sample for an average week during various times throughout the year, so that you can, get a better representation of that. Generally, don't do it if you have on a week that you have a large event in the library. Don't do it on a week where there's 13 inches of snow that comes into town. Don't do it on, here or there where it may skew the result. Try and do it in an average week. And then just multiply that by the number of weeks that you're open to get that annual number to put in here. So you'll see that here throughout part 5. So for circulation, in fact, I think we'll have time. I'm going to go through all of part 5 because we get a lot of questions here, and we'll highlight some of the common things. Circulation of adult books. We have a breakdown of adult and children's. I know that sometimes that's difficult to decide what's adult and what's children. I would say, however you catalog it, we do define children's, I believe, in the IMLS definition. Children, yeah, right here. Children's materials includes all juvenile and young adult materials. So if it's cataloged as a young adult material, you would include it in the children's circulation, if that helps. Make sure that you don't, if you include it in one category, don't double count it. In other words, if it's something that's maybe borderline children, young adult, and adult, and you make a judgment call based upon how it's cataloged to count it as an adult item, don't also count it as a children's item. Don't double count.
No, pick one or the other.
Pick one or the other and go with it. Yeah. And I would say that if you don't know or can't decide, just put it in adult. Usually is kind of the backup. So you'll notice here that the circulation of adult is not in purple, but circulation of children's physical materials is, and then the total. That's because IMLS just subtracts out the children's from the total, and that's how they get the adult. And 5.10, this is total annual circulation of other physical items. This would correlate to those things that we saw in part 4, the cake pans, puzzles, games, so on and so forth. Those don't get counted in adult or children's. They get counted in the other section, if that makes sense. So if you had a 0 for puzzles, games, other items, and then a number here, you might get an edit check and say, wait a minute. Or the opposite is also true. If you entered that you had holdings for cake pans, puzzles, and games, and you entered a 0 for circulation of other physical items, you would probably get an edit check there. I've seen a few surveys like that where they've gotten an edit check and the explanation or the note was, we had cake pans, but nobody checked them out. So that would be one way to resolve that edit check. But the other correlates with that in the holdings part. So you don't include those in the other or in the adult or children's. Okay, that's kind of a common thing that happens from time to time. So then for e-material circulation, the good news here is if your library is in the Overdrive consortium, we pre-fill these numbers for you. Because there's a lot of categories that IMLS changed this around, I believe last year. And so now they want to know the total ebook circulation. But since we have that breakdown of adult and children's, we have to report adult and children's. But again, those are pre-filled for you. So if you have a question about this, like if you think this number is not accurate, let me know and I'll check with Deborah and find out, maybe double check those reports and make sure that they're correct. One thing here, if you'll notice here, If you have another vendor, you will need to add those circulations to the pre-filled number. So we have some libraries that have, the two common ones are Canopy and Hoopla. If you have Canopy or Hoopla, you're going to need to pull those numbers because we don't have access to those. And you're going to have to add those to whatever you have for Overdrive. So you'll need to make sure that those get added properly in the ebooks, e-audio, e-serials, e-video, and oh, that's it. And then you'll see down here we have a bunch of totals. So the total e-video circulation, total electronic circulation, total adult circulation, total children's. Because we had the electronic with the physical. And then the total is all of those plus the other items. Okay. For interlibrary loan, 5.28, you enter the total number of library materials that you loan to another library. These do not, one question that came up this year, it's came up in the past, somebody asked, do these have to be OCLC loans? And the answer is no, they do not. In other words, if you're in a small town and you get a phone call from the librarian in the town next to yours, asking if they can borrow some books that you have in your collection, you would count that here as an interlibrary loan, even though that doesn't go through OCLC. Whatever is loaned to another library, you would enter those loans here. And then the borrowed from, if you were the borrowing library, you would enter that number, the total for the year, in 5.29. You would also enter book club kits that are borrowed from the systems and also the Library Commission. You would count each title in the kit as a collection or as an interlibrary loan. So if you borrowed one kit and it had 10 books, that's 10 interlibrary loans. Okay. We have a question about automatic renewals. This was something that they added at the federal level, I think last year or the year before. If you offer those, again, this is just a yes/no question. Overdue fines, this was something that we started collecting, I think, 3 years ago, and then it became a national question. We have a breakdown for fines by material types. You notice in the pull-down menu here, we charge fines for all items, some material types. Some libraries only charge overdue fines for like DVDs or some patrons. Some libraries charge for adult items but not children's items. So if that's the case, you would select for some patrons here. And you'll notice here that we have some material types, and then we have the follow-up question, which is, do you charge fines for books, DVDs, CDs, large print, or other? You know, like say you checked out hotspots and you charged overdue fines for the hotspots, but not anything else. You would just enter that hotspots here in the other section. And then say it was for some patrons. You notice here how that grayed out. And then we have a new question here that says, which categories do you charge fines for? Say you only charge for adult, you would just enter adult here, or young adult, or the seniors, say they got charged. Notice how we specifically didn't put an age group on senior, because that's a large debate on what counts as a senior. So we leave that up to you.
Okay. So this is just for overdue. For
overdue fines, yeah, and that's the thing.
Like replacement fees, because that's a different type of. Is that
right? And if you click on the question mark, that answers that right here. It says overdue fines to not include charges for lost or stolen items. Right. So yeah, so say somebody returned an item a week late, you would select no, that we don't charge a fine for that. But if they kept the item for 3 months and you sent them a bill, then that's different than what this question is asking.
That's not an overdue, that's a replacement. Yeah.
And you see here how I click save and it says, because I selected borrower category, I got another edit check here that says, well, which category? So I'm going to select adult just to get past that.
And we have a question about materials borrowed from other libraries, interlibrary loan question.
Okay.
Would that include bookmobile?
Bookmobiles would count like you borrowed it from the bookmobile or the bookmobile circulated something.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by borrowed from other libraries.
So if you borrowed it from another library system's bookmobile, that bookmobile would count that as a circulation and not an interlibrary loan. Interlibrary loans go from library to library, not library to patron. So I think that's in the definition.
Okay, so if they deliver books that I order bi-weekly, so if it's coming from, it doesn't matter how you get it, as if it's library to library, that's interlibrary loan.
Correct. Yeah. So if so if in your example, if I'm understanding correctly, if they requested the book from the other library and then the bookmobile delivered it to the library, yeah, you would count that as an interlibrary loan.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. That's what they mean.
So these are some new questions here about research databases and who funds them. We tried to pre-fill this as much as we can with libraries that were in the Overdrive Consortium. And then also with like Nebraska Access. You'll notice here for the database question, this is pre-filled for yes for Nebraska Access. So everybody has access to Nebraska Access, so that's a yes. If you purchased a database solely by the library, that would be a yes here. And then we have number 5.35, which is, did you provide access to a database via a consortium, cooperative, or similar group? This is unusual, but I think one cooperative is the New York Times is now offered, I think, as a consortium through the commission. If you provided that, these are just simple yes, no questions. And then online learning platforms, the difference between a research database and an online learning platform. This gives us a little guidance here about what to count. The common ones would be like Mango Languages, Chilton's Auto Repair Manual, learning programs, homework assistance, that type of thing. Those would be online learning platforms, whereas the databases would be you know, things that we would typically see like from Gale or what's the one that Nebraska Access has? I'm drawing a blank through those set of databases. Okay. Outreach activities. This is a question that we added this year. This is a new question. And I think will be a national question at some point. I think they will pass this at the federal level. But these are maybe outreach, these are maybe activities that don't count as programs, don't meet the definition of a program, but maybe that libraries are providing to the community. And so we wanted to have a way to count that. And so we have examples here, such as attendance at community events, such as fairs, festivals, parades, or other holiday or special events, not to include fundraising or board-related activities. So say the library had an outreach booth at a community farmer's market or a community fair. That wouldn't count as a program because it doesn't meet the definition, but you would count it here as an outreach activity. And then there's collections outreach activities, such as book materials deliveries to homes, or book material pickups. A lot of libraries are providing these like for rehabilitation centers or nursing homes or preschools. They're providing book deliveries or pickups from those places. So you would count that, you can count that here as an outreach activity. And then we have a question about Overdrive Advantage. If you are an Overdrive Advantage, did you share those titles back through the consortium? Yes, no, or NA. And then you have the option here. If this is a yes, you can report the number of times those were shared. And if you have questions about those reports, you can contact Deborah Dragos, or Susan here at the commission can help you with those numbers. So programs, we get a lot of questions about programs. There's a lot of categories here for programs. We have a definition of what to count as a program here, and then some examples of what typical programs are. And then there's also one for the question marks that will pull up the definition. You count, the first part here is programs by age category. And again, this may be difficult to pick an age category. Say it's a children's program. You have to pick either 0 through 5 or 6 through 11 as the targeted audience. Don't count them in more than one category. And so whatever the targeted audience was, you would count that as a program here. If it's a recurring program, the same program, say you offered story time every week for a whole year for pre-K, that would be like a 52, even though it's the same program every week. So if it's a recurring program, you count every instance of it, of the program. And so you have 0 through 5, 6 through 11, total number of children's, young adult, and then we have another category called general interest. I would say that if it's a children's program, pick a category of 0 through 5 or 6 through 11. Don't put that in general interest. General interest is more for intergenerational programs. Like say you had a holiday event where you had activities for adults and children's, or family movie night, where really the program is more geared towards families or all ages. Put those in general interest and not the age categories. So for 0 through 5 or 6 through 11, just pick one that best meets your targeted audience. And then you'll notice here we have, so the total here in this example is 57 programs by age category. We have 3 questions that follow. With these 3 questions, what we're asking is, out of these 57 programs, how many were on site, how many were off site, and how many were virtual? And I believe that the virtual question is going to disappear next year, and it'll just be on site or off site. So you'll have to pick one or the other. If you offered a virtual program, it'd probably go into on site. And so if you had if all of these 57 programs were held on site, it's real simple. You just enter a 57 here and a 0 for the other 2, and then you have a total that matches, the age category matches where they were held. If those 2 totals don't match, like in this case, 69 down here and 57 up here, you're going to get an edit check, and it's going to say these numbers have to match. So say it was 47 on-site and 10 off-site and 0 virtual. You would just enter it like that, and it would be 57 and 57. And they match, and then you'd be able to go to the next page, and there would be no edit check. That's true also for attendance at library programs. So that's the next section. So we had those 0 through 5 programs. We want to know how many people attended those programs. The key factor with attendance is you count everybody that attends at that 0 through 5 targeted program, regardless of their age. And so say you had that story time for the pre-K, and you had 5 toddlers showed up and 5 parents, you would count 10 for the attendance in 0 through 5. So the attendance for the program matches where you counted the program. And so the structure here is the same as the programs. You'll see a total by age category, and then you'll see a total by where they attended, how many were on-site, off-site, or virtual. If it was a hybrid program where you offered a Zoom option in addition to in-person, you would count the attendance, the on-site, you would count the total attendance in, like, say, the 0 through 5, and then the on-site in the first one, and then the virtual in the other one, so that the total will still match. That was a hard part when we adopted this new structure, for people to grasp that the two totals needed to match, but I haven't seen very many issues this year. So I think a lot of people are now familiar with the structure of that and how to count it. Okay. I'm going to skip over these because these are pretty common. We don't get a lot of questions in these parts, and we're kind of at 11 o'clock right now, so.
Yeah.
Run over a little bit, but
yeah, we are a little after 11, and we do sufficiently say, show 11, but we're gonna go through whatever else Sam does want to share with you and make sure he gets through everything. But if you only allotted an hour for today, that's okay. We're recording the whole show, and you'll be able to watch the rest of it later if you need to.
So the technology part is pretty straightforward. These are yes/no questions. We don't get a lot of questions on the technology part. One thing that we've started to ask is we want to know your internet speed. So we have in 6.0, we have a range. You would enter your range here, but we also want you to do a speed test. So you'll notice here in 6.13 and 6.14, we have a link to a speed test. We want to know what your wired speed is and your wireless, just because that data is important to those of you that have worked with Andrew Sherman. He looks at these, and then you might want to consider doing a tech consultation if you're getting a wide variance or something like that. He may be able to come in and look at your equipment, and maybe you have outdated equipment or something like that that's affecting your speed. And so a lot of these questions here are helpful to him in conducting assessments for libraries. And then maybe comparisons as well. For staffing, a common thing here is we have different categories. We have a category for paid librarians. In 7.1, you enter the total number of people. So this is the number of people that you have working that either have the title of librarian or they're doing librarian work. Sometimes this is misunderstood because somebody may be having their title that they're a library technician or something like that. And do you count them as a librarian or do you count them as other staff? I always tell people doing the survey that if somebody is working the reference desk, they're doing circulation, they're answering reference questions, they're maybe doing cataloging, anything like that, I would count them as a librarian, even if they don't have an MLS or basic skills courses or anything like that. If they're doing that type of work, I would count them as a librarian. Absolutely. We do have a category for other, but that's really meant for people that are maybe behind the scenes. Maybe you're a larger library system that has an IT person. They don't work the reference desk. They don't, do that type of work. They just do troubleshooting, maintaining systems. They would be counted as other staff. Cleaning people would be counted as other staff. If you have an accountant or a bookkeeper that pays bills, they would be counted as other staff. But for all the others that are, maybe doing those things, I would count them as a librarian. If they're a shelver that also answers reference questions, I would count them as a librarian too. But if they're just doing shelving, maybe other staff. And so you'll notice here in this example, we had three librarians. In this case, the sum of the hours that those three people worked was 120. So 40 hours for each one. That calculates to 3 FTEs here. And then we want to know, or we also have the question here, how many of those 3 people have an MLS degree from an ALA accredited institution? In this case, we have 1. So this number can't be greater than 3. If we entered a 4 here and this number was higher than the others, you'd probably get an edit check saying this can't be higher than the total paid librarians. And then here's the other staff down here. So non-librarian paid staff, this would be the other category here. And then some totals there. And so let's assume that you've entered all your data and you're ready to submit your survey. You would then go over to this button here that says submit. And you click on that, and you'll notice here that part 4 is highlighted. That's because we didn't enter anything in part 4, and a lot of those were still blank. And so if we scroll down, it says the survey cannot be submitted until all sections have been completed. Please click on the highlighted page, review and save that page. And if we go back to part 4, we can see here we've got blanks, and this page was never saved. And so that's why we can't submit the survey. If this was completed, this would no longer be highlighted, and you would see a second submit button right down here. And then you would go ahead and click on that second submit button. When that happens, the system will automatically generate an email to me. I'll go in and look over your survey. If everything looks good, we'll go ahead and close it out. And then we print copies of your surveys and keep them locally. That way, if anything were to happen, Bibliostat is a great example. We saved a copy of everybody's survey when they submitted it. Mm-hmm. So we have those all electronically stored on our own network. They have since been bought by another company. That division has been bought by a company. I think it's One Library or Library One. I'm not sure which company. One of the two. And so you probably could get that from them, but we've saved a copy locally, and we have those if you want to look through them. I can email them to you. And then we have a supplemental survey that we like to have you complete. There's a link to it. There will be a link to it after you submit this, or you can go onto our website and type in supplemental survey. You can do that supplemental survey anytime throughout the year. Basically just check your hours, your board members, your staffing. That feeds into our website, your profile page on our website. And if you have a free website that is now offered from Vern is working on that. If your library doesn't have a website, he might have reached out to you about a free website that's available, just showing your basic information like your library hours, board members, link to your catalog, so on and so forth. So keeping that information up to date is important. You can do that anytime throughout the year, but we like to have you review it at least once a year after you submit the public library survey. So I think that covers the basics. We also do workshops in the fall, usually in each system, where we kind of go over a little bit more in depth the entire survey. But I think that overall our new tool is people aren't having too many issues with it, so that's a good thing. And we welcome any feedback that you have about maybe things that we can change or improvements that we can make to it. Vern, I think, has done a great job in getting this together in such a short period of time too. Hopefully we'll be able to meet that April 1st deadline. Mm.
Yeah, I was gonna say you and Vern worked so hard on this constantly. Once we found out that Bibliostat was no longer going to be available, we needed to have something to, that was going away. We still had to report something IMLS, and per Nebraska state statute, we still had to collect the data. So we didn't really have an option to just say, oh, well, I guess we can't.
Well, and the hard part is the edit check part, and that's the part that he worked on the back end. Typically, when we submit our data to IMLS, we get about 1,200 edit checks. So there's about 1,200 of those that come up. And so by having the ability to flag those when the library submits their survey and enter a note, then those notes are all ready to go, and we don't have to contact you later on and say, well, wait a minute, can you, is this correct or is it not correct?
Get all that figured out before.
Yeah. And we're a state that only, we have like 245 libraries that are on the survey. this isn't a state like New York or California or Texas that has, way more libraries than we do. So I can't imagine how they deal with the edit checks that they get.
Yeah.
But I'm here to help with your survey, so you feel free to contact me anytime. If you have questions, I can log in and look at what you're looking at.
We do have one question that just popped in that I definitely want to, a couple of questions just popped up. Let's see, I do want to get answered here, so we'll do these very quickly. Finance question, do we need to report on grants that were spent on us? For example, the Medica grant that Sherm did, that for the deep freeze and
no, you wouldn't report those because the money didn't actually pass through you or the foundation.
The actual money,
right.
You just used to pay for it. Yeah, so no, since you didn't receive actual money, you just received the benefit of it.
Right. That was provided by us, and in our case, it wasn't passed through. Like library improvement grants used to be passed through from IMLS. That's a little bit different situation than us receiving the money and then paying for a statewide project, basically, like deep freeze.
You did receive you can't. We paid deep freeze. We paid for it, not through you. Right.
And we can't allocate the percentage of that money that's spent, so no, you wouldn't report that.
And then another question, how do donated items get counted? No cost to us and expenditure, will it show up somewhere else?
So like if somebody donated some books or DVDs or something like that, you wouldn't report that in the finance part, but you would report it in library collections.
It's still in addition to your collection.
So I mean, and you might get an edit. I mean, we see that in some of there's a few smaller libraries that don't spend any money on books. They just get donations. And so their expenditures are zero, and then they're showing that they added books. And so typically they get an edit check. And we just have them enter a note saying that those items were donated to the library, and that satisfies the edit check.
We always want the data, we always want the numbers, but sometimes you might need to add a little explanation of the numbers.
Yeah, right. And make sure that your note doesn't contradict the edit check. So like, if you're getting an edit check because your programs were significantly lower than last year, make sure that your note says we offered less programs this year instead of more programs this year.
Yeah.
And I usually read those notes, so I can usually catch that in the review part too, but sometimes things slip through.
Yeah, sure. Nice.
And I would say don't enter a note unless you get an edit check. If you think you might get an edit check, if they don't ask for more explanation, we don't have to offer it to them. It may be just outside of that range and not trigger an edit check because all the ratios are different. And this was one of the things that Vern struggled with, was why is this ratio one way and this ratio, for children's programs it was one ratio, and then for adult it was different. And kind of the explanation to that is that IMLS, or actually the American Institute of Research, or AIR, they collect the data on behalf of IMLS and then report it for IMLS. The explanation is they look at the previous year data, and then they look at the outliers, so like the lowest 5% and the highest 5%, and then that's how they figure the ratios for the edit checks that they put on.
Yeah.
One more thing that I'll say is that typically in the spring, when we clean up our data after everybody's submitted their survey, hopefully we get all of those sent in before April 1st. We'll review those surveys that get sent in at the last minute, clean up our data, and then we try and publish that, in the spring or early summer. We like to have it published before the accreditation application opens, and all those data files are on our website. If you just type in data services, that'll take you to the page, the data files, or you can always contact me if you want a specific data set. I can pull the total data set and then like filter something out. Like say you want to just finance, I can filter everything out for you and then send that to you. But if you're looking at the data that's published by IMLS, they are a year behind us. And so we are now in the collection cycle for fiscal year 2025, and we will publish that later this spring, hopefully in May sometime, May or early June, since we're kind of behind a little bit. They will publish in the summer of fiscal year 2024 data. And so if you went and looked at their data, it's a year behind what we offer. So if you're looking for data from another state, sometimes we can get that. We can get that for you. I can contact the data coordinator, and we do that sometimes with the peer comparisons that Krista does on the accreditation. Well, maybe we'll have to look at libraries in another state, and we just get the data directly from them and not IMLS because it's more current.
All right. I don't see any other questions that came in while we were chatting. I'll just thank you, very helpful. So I think we will work on wrapping up. Yes, if you do have any questions, April 1st deadline, as it says there, so you've got about a month to get this done. Contact Sam if you do have any questions, issues, anything weird that happens, anything you need to know. What do I say here? Reach out to him.
And we are about 26% complete right now. So out of the libraries that are on the survey, there's about 26% that have completed it. So March is probably going to be a busy month for survey submissions. If you have a technical issue, I can try and help you with that. If it's like a login issue or something like that, or some weird error code, you can send an email directly to Vern Bias. But if it's something that I can help with, I can maybe filter out those requests because he has a lot of things on his plate.
Sam
sometimes we have to go to Vern and find out. But we've had very minimal. We had a couple libraries that had some error codes, but one of them was a library that was just added to the survey, so they got some error codes that were easy to resolve. But most of the other libraries, we haven't noticed any issues. So hopefully it'll go smoothly for you. Feel free to provide feedback, and we're keeping track of that for next year.
Yeah, and if you think, afterwards, if you think of things that could go differently, could be done differently, let Sam know, and we'll see about, this is something we're doing in-house, so we can tweak it to whatever we need and whatever libraries think might be useful.
That is one good thing. If I have an issue or something that I notice that I want changed, I can walk, 10 steps down the hall instead of emailing somebody in New Jersey.
Waiting for them to get back.
Waiting for them to get back for development. So.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Sam. This is great. I'm going to pull presenter control back to my screen here and do my little wrap up. So thank you so much. This is very important. As you said, you did do workshops in the fall at the systems, which was great for all the basic info that needed to be, just basics about what's being collected. But that was for the Bibliostat or the previous tool, which is no longer available to us. So I'm glad that we were able to do this and have a demo of the new one that we'll be using here in Nebraska going forward. All right, so thank you everybody for being with us today. As I said, the session has been recorded. If you type in, use whatever is your search engine of choice and type in NCompass Live, the name of our show, you'll get our main page here with our upcoming shows, but also we have our archive page. It's linked right here where all of our previous shows are listed. Today's show will be hosted up to here by the end of the day tomorrow at the latest, and everyone who attended today's show and registered for today's show will get an email from me letting you know when it's available. We will push it onto our social media and to our mailing list as well. We do have a Facebook page for NCompass Live. If you'd like to use Facebook, give us a like over there. And you can see here's a reminder about logging into today's show, letting you know what is up for next week, and then when recordings are available. We also use this hashtag NCompLive here on our Facebook page. We also post to the Nebraska Library Commission's the Instagram page as well. Don't have an Instagram page specifically for NCompass Live, just the Facebook, so do follow there. On the recording, we'll have a link to the YouTube recording for you to watch. If you do need to go back and refresh on anything. You can see here there is a search feature where you can search our show archives. If you want to see if we've done a show on a particular topic, you can search the full show archives or the most recent 12 months if you just want something very current. That is because this is the full show archives, and I'm not going to scroll all the way down, but you can see over here on the right, it's a pretty large page. This is because this is our full show archives going back to when NCompass Live first premiered, which was in January 2009. Which means we're starting our 18th year of NCompass Live, and we have all of our recordings here. So just do be aware when you do watch a show to the original broadcast date. They all have a date, they all dated. Some sort of shows will be fine to watch, stand the test of time, be good, still useful info, but some things will become old and outdated. Resources may have changed drastically, links may be broken, people may work at different places than when they presented for us 10 years ago. But this is something libraries do, keep things for historical purposes. And as long as we have a place to host our shows, which right now is the Library Commission's YouTube channel, we will always keep adding to our archive. So that wraps up today's show. Just a couple more things. Here's our upcoming shows. I've got more dates to be filled in, so keep an eye in here for the dates that aren't listed. Tomorrow we will talk. Next week, our session will be Tour de Force: Build Bridges by Leading Tours of Your Library. Carla Ublund will be with us from Connecticut, Stonington Free Library in Connecticut, talk about doing tours at your library to help us advocate and support the library and publicize the things that you do. So please do sign up and join us for that and any of our other upcoming shows. And one other thing we do here through the library at the Library Commission is Big Talk from Small Libraries. It is this Friday. It is in 2 days. Oh my gosh. So I run this. It's our annual conference. It is co-sponsored by the Association for Rural and Small Libraries, ARSL. All of our presenters are from libraries with a population served or an FTE. If you're a school or an academic, because that's a full-time enrollment of 10,000 or less. So these are the small and rural libraries. It is this Friday, and our full schedule is available here on the page. You can see all the great sessions we have throughout the day, and you can register. If you want to pre-register, you can do that. Registration is open till the end of the day, Thursday. But even after, if you don't get pre-registered, I will be posting the login link on the conference page as well. But if you want to, please do register. It's free and open to anyone in the world to attend. And we have a schedule of 50-minute sessions throughout the day and 4 10-minute lightning rounds on the lunchtime hour. That's noontime Central Time. So you can see what all of our topics are for the day here. If you cannot join us for any of those, we do record the entire day, and then the recordings are posted, split up into each of the individual sessions for you to watch later at your convenience. So please do register and join us on Friday for Big Talk from Small Libraries, and register for any of our upcoming NCompass Live shows. So thank you everybody for being here. Thanks, Sam. And hopefully we'll see you all on a future episode of NCompass Live. Bye-bye.